Hello everyone and welcome back to another Monster Hunter video. Today I'm going to be talking about my predictions for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. I'm going to go over some maps, gameplay changes, and lastly monsters that I think are likely to return in Sunbreak. And if you guys agree or disagree with me or have any other ideas, please leave it in the comments below as well. Now let's get on with the video. First off, I'll be going over possible maps that I would like to see in Sunbreak. Now, we did get the confirmation of the Citadel, which is a new, pretty huge map that would be coming in Sunbreak, but I believe that we may be getting one or two new maps on top of the Citadel. Obviously, I don't think all of these maps will be coming into Sunbreak because that's just too many. I'm just giving out different options that I think are likely. So first off is one returning map. Now, I hope that the Ruined Pinnacle from GU will be returning, just because it is a really interesting and cool map, and it has the Valstrax Tower. With Valstrax already in Rise, it does kind of make sense to put the Ruined Pinnacle into Sunbreak, and I think it would be really interesting to see how they could make it into a full map without any zones or loading zones in it, just because there's a lot of verticality to that map as well. Another returning map that I could see be added into Sunbreak is Frozen Seaway, because from the trailers it kind of looks like a Frozen Seaway could be possible in Elgato, especially with the frozen part of the Citadel map. And I would really want Zamtrios coming back. I'll talk about the monsters later, but I really want Zamtrios coming back, and Frozen Seaway would really fit in with that. Another map that I could see them adding is a map for castle sieges or new rampages, like a big siege fight map, kind of like they did for Narwa's area and All Mother Narwa's area. Just a really big map to fight these huge monsters, since I think they'll probably be adding in a bunch of siege fights into Sunbreak. And lastly, I put in here a Guiding Lands map, and the Citadel may be a Guiding Lands type map, but if it isn't, I would really like to see, a map containing multiple areas that are different and kind of work similar to the Guiding Lands. Next, I'm going to be going over gameplay changes I hope will be in Sunbreak. Obviously, just getting it out of the way, a new endgame. I would really love RNG quests that give you different rewards at the end, kind of like the decorations of the world, but not really the same as decorations, or something like the Guiding Lands I mentioned earlier. Obviously, everyone wants a new endgame since Rise didn't really have one, so I'm not going to really spend too much time on it. So, new switch skills have already been confirmed, so I'm not going to really talk about that, but I hope that they're really unique. They already look like they're pulling a lot from GU, which is really interesting and cool. So, it's nice to see that new wire bug and switch skill moves are coming. Now, sieges. I really want sieges to be coming back in Rise, because the wire bugs can really help siege fights become more interesting. Like, imagine Lao Shanglong, where he actually attacks you for once in his life, and you can use wire bugs to kind of zip around and hit him. Wire bugs really give Capcom an opportunity to make siege fights fun, which hasn't really been a recurring thing with siege fights for most of them. Like Lao Shanglong or Zora Magdaros, those fights can really be improved with the inclusion of wire bugs and Rise. And I will discuss more monsters that I like to see that are kind of siegey later down the line. But I think this is the perfect time to implement more siege fights, so I hope that's what they'll be doing in Sunbreak. But also, another thing kind of similar to sieges, rampages. I would really like to see rampages coming back. Obviously, they're kind of a bit stale and get a bit boring, but I would really like to see them make rampages harder, because rampages are really easy right now, and I would really like to see them improve upon them and make them actually difficult. But I would also be fine with rampages going away. Now, the next thing I hope that would be coming back is a new status effect from Malzeno. We're already getting the return of Bleed with Shogun Centaur, so I hope they'll be adding a new status effect like they did Hellfire and Rise. And it looks like with those weird little Kezu looking butterflies with their mouths and stuff, that we may actually be seeing a new life drain or blood suck status effect from Malzeno. And I would also like to see the return of a couple other unused status effects, such as the snowball status effect and stuff like that. I think it would really add a lot more personality to Rise. Another gameplay feature that everyone's been wanting is Apex Monster Armor. Obviously, I'd really love to see Apex Monster Armor, and I think they have been listening to the community really well with a lot of these updates, and I think it's actually pretty likely that we will be getting Apex Monster Armor in Rise, because they're obviously going to introduce a lot more Apexes, and it would make them kind of anticlimactic to introduce these big Apex monsters but not really be able to use their parts for anything. So I think it's very likely that we will be seeing Apex Monster Armor. The last gameplay feature that I really want to see, not many people are actually talking about right now, but it's turf wars for new monsters, specifically Chameleos and Valstrax. The fact that Chameleos and Valstrax don't have turf wars and Rise should be considered illegal. Chameleos and Valstrax, I think, would have the best turf wars of any monsters in the game. Like, imagine Valstrax with Magnamalo or Valstrax fighting Teostra. I don't really know why they didn't give Chameleos turf wars with Kushala and Teostra, because, you know, they're obviously the trio and they're bought back in Rise. But Chameleos in any monster or Valstrax in any monster would be really cool to see. And I don't know why people really aren't talking about it, but it is really disappointing to not see them have any turf wars at all in the base game. Now that moves us into the last category, which is monsters. Now this isn't really in any particular order. I just would be going over monsters that I really like to see, or monsters that I think are really likely to come back and Rise. So first off, obviously Gormagala. I think Gormagala has a really good chance coming back in Sunbreak because of the whole theming and everything, as well as the community's push for Gormagala to come back. I really want to see Gormagala. He's such a sick and unique fight. He's also somewhat difficult, and they can make him difficult in Rise. And all those things combined make me really think that he would be a super good fit into this ultimate release, basically, since he's kind of that late game Elder Dragon-y type monster. Next is Agnaktor. I really want Agnaktor. Araktor is already in the game. Leviathans were brought back. How could you bring back Leviathans and not bring back Agnaktor? Like, come on. I think he's probably going to be in Sunbreak because people really want him. And obviously Araktor's already in the game, so I think he would fit really well into maybe obviously the lava caverns, or maybe a new Lavery type map that he would introduce in Sunbreak. But Agnaktor, like, come on. And kind of similar to Agnaktor, Tetsukabra. Baby is already in the game. He's not been in 5th gen yet, so it'd be really good to bring him back. And he's just a really unique monster on himself, with the amphibian class already being in the game. I think he could fit in really well. And similar to those two, Zamtrios. Now, like I talked about earlier, Frozen Seaway, I really would want to see back. But even if Frozen Seaway isn't back, Zamtrios could really fit in well with the Frost Islands. I mean, it's ice and water, and he's a shark. And he's a shark that dives under snow, so I think he'd fit super well into the Frost Islands or the Frost part of the new map, the Citadel. I think he would just really fit into Rise well. Also, there already are Zamites in the game, which are the baby forms of Zamtrios. And overall, I'd really like to see the 3 amphibians come together in Sunbreak. Now, those last 3 monsters are really likely to come back because they already have the baby versions of them in the game. But this one, I think, is really unlikely, but I would really love to see. And it's a new crab. Since Shogun is coming back, and they kind of did the same thing for Nursilla with Rachna Kadaki and Rise, I think it'd be really interesting to get a new crab in Sunbreak, because there hasn't been a new crab since the 2nd generation when crabs were introduced. It's kind of crazy to think about, since every other monster class besides Snake Wyverns have been getting new monsters seemingly every game. And with Rachna Kadaki's introduction and Shogun's return in Sunbreak, I would really like to see a new crab, because I think they could put a really unique spin on it. Now, keeping with the theme of unlikely picks, I'm going with Puria Puria. So Puria Puria is a frontier monster and has never made its way into the main series. I'd really like to see it come back because it's such a unique monster. I think it could fit really well into Sunbreak, especially with the ocean theme of Elgato and the ships and everything. And I think it could really add something to the game that no other monster adds. But obviously, since it's a frontier monster, it probably won't make it, but I would still love to see it. Next is a Magnamalo variant or subspecies. I think this is pretty likely to get into Sunbreak because, you know, they obviously had Nergigante in Base World and then Ruiner Nergigante in Iceborne. And there are a bunch more instances of a flagship getting a variant or subspecies in the next game. So I'd really like to see a Magnamalo variant. Also, they have already confirmed Blood Orange Bishatin, so I think they're probably going to be doing what they did in Iceborne and introducing a bunch more variants and subspecies of monsters newly added into Rise. So I think a Magnamalo variant or subspecies is pretty likely. Next I have is Deviljho. Now I think Deviljho is pretty likely to get added into Rise. You already have his brothers with Rajang and Basilgeuse. So I think he would fit really well into Rise, especially with this whole, anger and blood and everything that would fit well with the Eastern European, monsters of Sunbreak. Also, there's the fact that there are only 2 Brute Wyverns in Rise so far, and I think if they made Deviljho an invader, because the only real invader in Rise is actually Valstrax, so I think we need something to add the Brute Wyvern category and also the invader category, and I think Deviljho just really fits that bill. Another Brute Wyvern that I could really see them adding, and I would really want them to add, is Duramboros. Now, Duramboros is also a Brute Wyvern, so it kind of fills out that category of adding more Brute Wyverns into the game. But also, he hasn't been in the series for a while, and people really want him back, so I think he can make his way in. Next is Valhazak. Now, I think Valhazak is really likely to come into Sunbreak. He'd really fill out the Western monsters, as he does fit that zombie-like role, and really fits the theme well of Sunbreak. Also, he's kind of a later tier monster, being an Elder Dragon and all, so I think they could really implement him well into Sunbreak. Even though he was just in the last game, he does really fit well with the themes of Sunbreak, and I think they could make him unique in this game. Malfestio is the next monster I'd really want to see in Sunbreak. He doesn't really fit well with the themes. He is just such a unique and cool monster. I really want him to be in the game. I don't think he's that likely, but he does introduce confusion, which hasn't been in the series since GU. So I think he could be likely if they're looking to add more status effects, but I just really want him to be in the game. But a monster that I do think is really likely is Legaia Cruz. Now, Legaia Cruz hasn't been in the 5th gen yet. He got cucked hard in World, being added in, but then the Leviathan skeleton didn't work, so they had to take him out. And he's such a unique and cool monster that he should be added into Sunbreak, honestly. I'm going to be surprised if he doesn't get added, since there's such a big community push for him, and he may not be in the base game, but I think he could be added in something like a title update. Now, a bit of a weird pick for me is Giganox. He hasn't been in the series for a long time, I think since the 3rd generation. I know he is sort of similar to Kezu, but he does have his unique spin, unless it's Baleful Giganox, which is just basically Kezu. Also, he is kind of like this creepy monster, which does really fit well with Sunbreak, and I think it could round out the roster with him being basically a pseudo wyvern too. I think his chances do get knocked a bit since Malzeno's main gimmick, I think, is sucking life out of the players, which is kind of similar to Giganox, but I still think he's pretty likely to get in. Honestly, I think Quetzalcoatl could be a really unique candidate for Sunbreak. He hasn't been in the game since GU, and there's already Fang Beast in the game, but I do think he adds something unique to the Fang Beast category and not just like a carbon copy of Rojang like Blangonga is. So I really hope he's getting in, and I also think he's pretty likely since he is kind of that mid-tier monster that I think could really start off Sunbreak well. Another monster that I do think could be added into Sunbreak is Gravios. I don't like Gravios, but he's pretty likely since his baby Basarios is already in, and Gravios is just a grown version of Basarios. I really hope he doesn't get added into the game because he's so annoying to fight, but he is sort of likely, I have to admit, since Basarios is already in the game. Another monster I want to mention really quickly is Brachydios. I don't have much to say about him. He was in World, so I don't think he's that likely to be brought back. He is part of that Brute Wyvern category that I would like to see filled out a bit more, and I think he's just a really good monster. Next, I think Narjarala could be added back in. Now, Rise already brought back the Neopteran class with Rachna Kadaki, and now is bringing back the Carapacian class. So it looks like Capcom is bringing back classes that haven't been used in a while. No large monster Snake Wyvern has been in the game since Narjarala is the only really one. It would be really nice to see him again, and I honestly think he's pretty likely since they're bringing back a bunch of weird classes that they haven't used in a while. Narjarala is a really unique monster, and I think could fit that mid to later tier category of monster. Kind of the same reason for Narjarala. Celtis and Celtis Queen I'd really like to see come back because, you know, they're that Neopteran class that hasn't been in the game since 4th gen. I could see them fitting really well into that like kind of swampy area of the Citadel, and I think they could add something to the game that no other monster can, especially with their unique, you know, kind of converging ability where they become one monster for a bit. And it seems like Capcom wants every category of monster to be in this game, so that's kind of why I picked Celtis and Celtis Queen and Narjarala. And Celtis Queen is just a really solid monster, so I'd like to see it come back. Another monster I'd like to see come back, but this time I think is not likely at all, is Dire Morales. The design and fight is really interesting. I know water combat isn't in the game, and that is a huge part of his fight. but I think they could redesign it if they really wanted to not have any water combat. He is a really out-of-the-box pick for me, but I think he does really fit the theme well of Sunbreak, of this big, kingly monster that really can mess some stuff up and would be a really cool fight to see in the new generation. Another kind of big monster that I'd like to see come back that I talked about earlier is Lao Sheng Lung, kind of the same as the other siege fights I've talked about, because I think it could really be changed for the better in Sunbreak with the wire bugs, and I'd really like to see their take on it in newer generations, since it is one of the first Elder Dragons ever introduced to the series and the first siege fight ever introduced to the series. So I like to see how they would rework it for the 5th gen and the new players movement with the wire bugs. Another monster that I would like to see have a rework is Monoblos. It hasn't been in the series for such a long time. It is that 1st gen Monster Hunter monster, and it has been kind of pushed to the side with the spotlight on Diablos for a while, but I would love to see it back and given a rework, because I think they could really make it unique from Diablos and have its own kind of identity now, but I don't think it is really that likely since it hasn't even been in GU, so I don't really know why they would add it into Sunbreak, but I would just really like to see it come back. Another big monster that I think is likely for Sunbreak is Nakarkos, because it hasn't been in the 5th gen, it has such a unique design, and it is that kind of big spectacle fight that I think could really be improved with the wire bugs. It does directly attack you a lot, so they don't really have to make a huge change with it, but it would be super interesting to see what they could do with it, and it does actually really fit the theming of Sunbreak, with it covering itself in all the bones, kind of like Frankenstein, I guess. So I think he's actually pretty likely to get added. Korapeko also, I think, could be added into Sunbreak, since it hasn't been in the series that long and could fit well with Devil Joe. I don't really have much to say on it. It is just a really unique fight, and I hope he does come back. Especially if Devil Joe is coming back, I think they fit really well together. Sregios is another monster that I think is likely because it hasn't been in the series for a while and has such a unique design. Also, we need to get all the Pinecone boys into one game. Blood Orange Michitin, Basil Geese, and Sregios. And he is a flagship monster, and Capcom likes to bring back flagship monsters a ton. So I could see them bringing back Sregios. And since Bleed is already getting added back into the game, Sregios can fit one of those Bleed monster categories. Now, speaking of Shogun Centaur and Crabs, Shen Garan. I would really love to see Shen Garan come back. He is a big monster, a big siege fight. I keep talking about siege fights throughout this video. The Crabs are coming back. He fits that Carapacian category. He has such a unique design, and he has been out of the series forever. So I think they could really make him unique in this game, having to deal with wire bugs and everything. And I think they can make him a really interesting fight and make him really attack you and target you, instead of how he kind of just walks around like he does in the original games that he appears in. So I'm really hoping Shen Garan gets added. I don't know how likely he is because he's such a big monster. And if they do add siege fights a lot, then I think he is pretty likely, but I don't know if that's what Capcom is really thinking. That's just what I'm really hoping for. And a ton of people haven't even gone in to fight Shen Garan. They probably don't even know Shen Garan exists. So I think they could really put a spotlight on him that he hasn't gotten in a while. Another thing that I want to see from the monster side of things from Sunbreak is the return of rare species. Now, rare species are kind of like subspecies, but way more powerful, way more crazy, and there are only a limited amount of them. Now, with the focus on variants in World and Iceborne, I think that it's pretty safe to say that they're going to try doing something different for Sunbreak, and I could really see that being the return of rare species. Also, rare species are really interesting and have been absent for this series for frankly too long. So I think rare species should make the return in Sunbreak. My last pick for monsters that I think will be added into Sunbreak is Yamasukami. I really want Yamasukami back. He has such a unique fight and such a unique monster. He adds a lot of lore to the game, which would be really interesting. He does fit that theming of... He does really fit the theme of Western mythology, like a big kind of Kraken type monster. He is a big siege fight that I think they could really change by moving him to a different map, because Yamasukami is only really on one map and stays in the same place. So I'd really like to see how they would change him to fit different types of maps. A bunch of people have been wanting him back since they didn't get to experience him in the first place. And I think he is pretty likely to come back since he is that huge siege fight and does fit that theming pretty well. And I think he would be really unique in Sunbreak. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Please like it if you enjoyed, it really does help, and visit my channel for more Monster Hunter content. I have a lot of content on there already, and I will be covering Sunbreak in the future as it gets released and as it gets updated. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys later.